I'm just going to give you a bit of a weekly roundup of where we are on the farm at the moment, what's been happening over the last couple of weeks since I think I last put a clip up. Just coming down here to look at my green manure again. It hasn't really, developed hugely. I'm slightly questioning the seed rate. It was about a third clover, maybe slightly more than a third clover, a third Pawsey and a third crimson clover. Very little evidence of the crimson clover, and the mustard, even though it's obviously here, it's not really as thick as I'd possibly like it to be. The Pawsey is there, and when you start looking, there's quite a lot of Pawsey about, as long as lots of other weeds, well, mayweed and a few sort of annual thistles and stuff. This field here is about 34 hectares. Just over the hedge over there's another field of 20 hectares. And just over the rise there's a small field of about 4.5 hectares, and back at the home farm there's another 18 hectares. And the idea with this is to plough it after Christmas, but there's quite a big block of land to do that in the first year. We're sort of trying green manures on this sort of heavy clay soil. So in reality, I think the field that's just over the rise there, which is a very heavy field on a slope, which would be a nightmare if it got too wet, we'll probably plough that, and possibly one or two of the other fields. But I think leave this big field here, because it's a big field, nice long pulls to plough. Probably definitely leave this one over winter, but maybe plough the other one up, the other fields up before Christmas. But anyway, yeah, it's obviously worked as far as establishing the green manure is concerned. But rates of seed probably looking at for next year, and whether or not we include the expensive element of clover. And this is the first wheat field that we sowed this year. It's now 2 weeks ago where this was drilled. You can see that it's a bit patchy because of this horse drill, where the seed depth is very difficult to control, and so it doesn't look ideal. Now this is a bit here where we didn't blind weed it. That's go with our Harrowcomb weeder after the crop, just before the crop was about to emerge, to try and get rid of either ungerminated or germinated blackgrass plants. It's too early really to look at and doing blackgrass plants at the moment, but I'm really just still looking at establishment. So this bit wasn't blind weeded here, and this is the bit where we started very aggressively, and it looks as though actually there's a slightly lower plant population here, but in fact you're just looking at one or two of the clods maybe masking a little bit of the green where the wheat is up. But I would say that actually there's very little problem with the blind weeding on here. And just walking over here a little bit further, we'll go to where we blind weeded a little less aggressively, because we were worried we were pulling out too many seeds. And as you can see, I don't think that there's a huge amount of difference. But what we're going to do is come back later on here, do some plant counts, do some blackgrass plant counts to see actually if that early blind weeding actually made any difference. But as I say, the most striking thing is with the blind weeding is the seed depth issue, and if you could drill everything at 1.5 inches deep, get it all come up at the same time, I think your blind weeding strike would be much more controlled and would be much more effective. If you've watched any of my other clips, you'll also know that our undersown clover establishment was variable that we established last spring, but where it did establish well on all the fields is around the headlands. And what I'm putting that down to, we had a very dry time over, and we have had a very dry time over harvest, which has been great for harvest, but not so good for the clover, which suffers from drought. And also lack of light in a winter crop. And the reason why the headlands, I've sort of come to the conclusion, established well is because they were slightly more compacted, so therefore held a bit more moisture, and also because we're turning on them doing our weed surfing, there's more light, and you can almost see the lines where the sort of tyres went round where the clover is established. So after harvest we re-sowed some of the clover just by putting it on with our harrowcone weed, or just tickling it in with that and then rolling it twice. And actually you can see the line of the headland here. It's very sort of marked where suddenly the clover stops. But I'm happy to say that the clover that we sowed is coming up, and even though some of it's still very small, it's got a couple of true leaves on it now. And so hopefully, even if we start to get some frost soon, you know, that's still going to be okay. But as you can see, even that's still being nibbled. So hopefully it'll get away. And if we graze it with some sheep in the springtime, hopefully that'll sort of spread across the field and make a good stand of clover, which is the base of our fertility building, part of our rotation. So it's important to get a good stand of clover. So thinking of clover next year and bearing in mind what I just said, these fields here are ones that are going to be undersown in the spring with clover. And so thinking about the light issue, these fields that we've sowed on wide rows, to help, you know, if that is one of the major factors of why it didn't establish this year, or one of the factors why it didn't, then we're going to address it with this wide row thing in winter crops. The other thing is that this land here is the stuff that had poultry manure spread on it, and we had to incorporate it quickly, so it's been effectively min-tilled. It's had a couple of passes with the carrier. We haven't killed all the beans, but as you can see, the majority of them are going to be in the rows, and so we'll hoe those out. There's a little bit of black grass coming up, but nothing that's not, you know, it's not too bad. But hopefully we'll get that with the hoe as well. But you've always got to be thinking ahead. So we're already thinking about next spring, about how we're going to get this clover to establish consistently well every year. And the plan is, you know, wherever we have got clover to be undersown in the autumn, if we're sowing autumn crops, then put them on wide rows. And the other thing we're doing today is to start, well, we're just finishing pulling our bean land down. This has been sort of sitting on the plough for a while, and it's got very dry, so it's drying in big clods. We're supposed to get a lot of rain this weekend, which will hopefully penetrate these clods, and then we'll go through the land once more again after that, so we can drill our beans from any time from the 20th of October onwards. I've learnt my lesson from drilling beans early organically. There's just too much risk of disease if you go much before the end of October, also the last week of October.